She told me her meeting ran long, but the lights in the meeting room were off when I walked past it. No voices. No shuffling papers. No projector humming. Just an empty space that felt colder than it should have been. I stopped outside the glass window, staring at the vacant chairs arranged around the polished table. Not even a coffee cup sat there. No signs of anyone having been in the room at all. And that would have been a normal sight if my wife hadn't sworn she was still inside. The hall was so quiet I could hear the faint buzz from the ceiling lights. My pulse thudded in my ears. I checked the time on my phone again, even though I already knew what it would say. She had texted me 15 minutes earlier. Still in the meeting. Might be another hour. I could still hear her voice reading the words. I waited by the window another minute, trying to convince myself that maybe she'd meant a different room. Maybe she stepped out. Maybe they changed locations. Anything that made the knot in my stomach loosen. I even walked down the hallway, glancing into the other meeting rooms. All of them were dark and empty. I stood in the middle of the corridor, holding my coat in one hand and my phone in the other. Something felt wrong. Wrong in a way that made my hands tremble a little. I hadn't planned to stop by her office. I'd just finished early at work and thought I'd surprise her by picking her up. Maybe grab dinner together. Something simple. Something we hadn't done in weeks because our schedules kept pulling us in different directions. But the moment I saw the darkened room, it felt like someone had knocked the air out of me. I dialed her number. She didn't answer. I called again. This time she picked up on the third ring, but her voice sounded strained, like she was trying to speak softly. "Hey," she said. "I'm still in the meeting. Can I call you after?" My grip tightened around the phone. "Which room?" "I'm here." There was a pause. A long one. "You're what?" "I'm at your office," I said, trying to keep my tone calm. "Where's your meeting?" Another pause. Longer. Heavy. She cleared her throat, but it sounded off. We moved upstairs. "What room?" "I'll meet you in the lobby," she said quickly. "Just give me a minute." The call ended before I could respond. I stood there staring at my reflection in the darkened glass, watching the tightness around my own eyes. She didn't sound flustered. She sounded caught, like someone who had been running and suddenly tripped. I waited 5 minutes. Then 10. Finally, the elevator dinged, and she stepped out. She smiled when she saw me, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Hey," she said softly, walking over and giving me a quick kiss. "What are you doing here?" "I told you. I came to pick you up." She nodded, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Her hand shook slightly. "Sorry, everything's been hectic." "Your meeting ended fast." She forced a small chuckle. "Yeah, people were tired. We cut things short." I studied her face. Her foundation was a little smudged around her cheek. Her lipstick looked worn, as if she'd been wiping her mouth. There was a faint flush on her neck. Not something most people would notice. But I knew her. And I knew when something didn't fit. "Who was in the meeting?" I asked as we walked toward the elevator. "Just the usual team." I was quiet for a moment. Strange. The room was empty. She froze for half a second before forcing a casual shrug. "We switched last minute. Miscommunication." But she didn't look at me when she said it. On the drive home, she filled the silence with small talk. Work stories. The weather. A show she wanted to watch. None of it carried any weight. It all felt like filler. Even the way she held her phone seemed different, closer to her chest, screen turned away from me, thumb resting on the side like she was guarding something. That night, she went to bed early. I stayed in the living room, staring at the dark TV screen, replaying every detail in my mind. The empty meeting room. Her 2 quick explanations. The way she'd shown up flustered, not relieved or excited to see me. Something was slipping between us. Something fragile. Something she wasn't ready to say out loud. And part of me didn't want to know what it was. Over the next few days, little things started standing out. She began taking longer to get ready for work. Not just a few minutes, 40, 50 minutes. She'd change her clothes twice. Sometimes 3 times. Her makeup got heavier, more polished. She always used to be simple before leaving the house. Now she checked herself in the mirror, so Often I started avoiding looking at her reflection. Her phone stayed locked. She used to leave it lying around without a care. Now she kept it on silent, face down, sliding it into her pocket whenever she noticed me glancing toward it. I tried talking to her. "Everything good at work lately?" I asked one evening while she chopped vegetables for dinner. She kept her eyes on the cutting board. "Why do you ask? You seem stressed." She pressed her lips together. "Just busy. You know you can talk to me." She nodded, but her shoulders stayed stiff. "I know." She didn't talk. Later, when she showered, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her purse. Part of me wanted to reach inside and grab her phone. Another part felt sick for even thinking it. But suspicion changes a person. It twists your insides, warps your trust, makes you feel like you're drowning even when the room is dry. I didn't touch her phone. That night, she fell asleep quickly, back turned toward me. I watched the rise and fall of her breathing, wondering how many things she was keeping locked behind her silence. The next morning, she left early for another meeting. After she drove off, I stood in the kitchen with my coffee, staring at the clock. Something inside me snapped, not loudly, but firmly, like a quiet decision that had been building for days. I got in my car and drove to her office again. When I arrived, the building was already alive with movement. Employees badging in, doors swinging, keyboards tapping somewhere beyond the glass doors. I walked slowly through the halls, heart pounding harder with each step. I checked the meeting room from before. Empty. I checked the one across the hall. Also empty. I glanced through the third one, fourth one, nothing. Not a single sign that any long meeting was happening at all. I asked one of her coworkers, someone I'd met a few times at office events. "Sorry to bother you," I said lightly, "but do you know where Claire's meeting is?" The woman frowned. "Meeting?"
Yeah.
She said she had one this morning. She shook her head. "There's nothing scheduled for her team today." My stomach dropped. "You're sure?" I asked quietly. "Positive. I handle the calendar invites." Then her face softened. "Is everything okay?" I nodded, but my voice felt like it belonged to someone else.
Yeah.
"I'm fine." I wasn't. I walked outside, the cold air hitting me hard. The sky felt too open, too wide, like it knew how small I was feeling. She didn't show up at her office. She didn't have a meeting. She wasn't where she said she'd be. Again. My breaths came fast and uneven. My palms felt damp. I leaned against a nearby wall, closing my eyes, feeling everything I'd been trying to ignore rush to the surface. I knew where I needed to check next, and I hated myself for knowing it. There were only so many places someone could disappear to. Only so many lies you could stack before they formed a pattern. I drove. My hands shook on the steering wheel the whole way. And when I finally pulled up outside the building I feared most, her gym, the one she suddenly started going to twice as often, her car was already there, parked crooked, like she'd been in a rush. I sat in my car, staring at the taillights glowing in the dim lot. The truth wasn't far now. I could feel it, like standing in front of a door you're scared to open because you already know what you'll see. I stepped out. My legs felt heavier than they should have. My breath tasted sharp. I walked toward the entrance. Each step felt like it might break me. The gym lobby was warm compared to the cold outside, but the air felt stale and heavy, like it hadn't moved in hours. Music thumped faintly from the workout rooms, but it did nothing to drown out the buzzing in my mind. The receptionist barely glanced up from her computer as I walked in, offering a distracted greeting before returning to her screen. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what I planned to do. I didn't know if I wanted answers or if I was terrified to find them. My heart felt unsteady, my breath uneven. I kept my eyes on the hallway that led to the studios. Her car was outside. Her meeting didn't exist. All the pieces were sliding into place whether I was ready or not. I walked past the front desk and down the hallway, moving slowly so my footsteps wouldn't echo too loudly. The first room on the left was dark, empty except for a few stray yoga mats leaning against the wall. The second room had a class in session, older women doing a slow stretch routine with a cheerful instructor who definitely wasn't someone my wife would be here for. The third studio door was half closed. I stopped outside it, hand hovering near the metal handle. I could hear faint voices, low and muffled, like someone had pressed a pillow against the sound. I leaned closer, keeping my breath quiet. A man's voice, then hers.
Soft.
Familiar. Too familiar. My chest tightened. I pushed the door open just enough to see inside. They stood near the back corner, half hidden behind a row of treadmills. He was facing her, leaning in close as she spoke. Her hand rested lightly on his arm, her thumb brushing the fabric of his sleeve like it was the most natural thing in the world. Her posture told me everything. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't tense. She looked comfortable.
Close.
Intimate. Closer than she'd been with me in months. I swallowed hard, feeling something settle painfully deep in my ribs. I didn't step into the room. I didn't announce myself. I just watched for a few seconds that felt like they stretched far too long. She laughed at something he said. The sound didn't match the cold, clipped tone she used with me when she came home tired or distracted. This laugh was soft.
Warm.
The kind she used to give me when we were still us. He reached out and tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear. She didn't pull away. I stepped back from the doorway before either of them could see me. My fingertips tingled. My throat felt raw. Every part of me wanted to fall apart right there in the hallway, but I kept moving one foot after the other, all the way back into the lobby. I walked straight outside, the cold air hitting me in a way that felt almost violent. I sat in my car with my hands resting on the steering wheel, staring forward without seeing anything.
I didn't know how long I stayed like that.
Minutes. Maybe longer. Eventually, the gym doors opened. I didn't move, but I watched the reflection in my side mirror. They stepped out together. He walked beside her with an ease that made my stomach twist. She kept her head slightly tilted toward him, the way she used to tilt it toward me when she still cared about what I said. At the top of the steps, he touched her wrist lightly, stopping her. She smiled at him. A small smile, but real. Then he pulled her into a hug. Not a friendly pat-on-the-back hug. A slow one. A familiar one. A hug that lasted too long to be innocent. I forced myself to look away when they finally separated. She walked to her car. He walked to his. Neither of them noticed me sitting just 2 rows away. When her engine started, something inside me snapped awake. I didn't want anger. I didn't even want revenge. I just needed to hear her speak the truth in her own voice. I needed confirmation of what my gut was screaming. I pulled out of the parking space and followed her. Not close enough to scare her, but close enough to stay behind the same turns, the same lights. She drove the route home like nothing in her life was unraveling. Like she hadn't just wrapped herself around another man minutes earlier. She parked in our driveway and sat in the car for a second, staring at her phone. Probably composing her next lie. Probably drafting another excuse to explain the missing hours of her meeting. When she finally walked toward the house, I waited until she stepped inside before getting out of my own car. I followed her in, closing the door quietly behind me. She was shrugging off her coat when she saw me standing there. She froze. "Hey," she said with a startled smile that didn't look right. "I didn't know you were home early." I didn't return the smile. "Where were you?" Her face shifted, the smile faltering just a little before she picked it back up. "I told you I had a meeting, then I stopped by the gym." "A meeting?" I repeated. She nodded. "Yeah, it ran longer than expected." "Who was there?" Her eyes flickered for a split second. A tiny window of panic. "Just the usual group." "No one's schedule matched yours," I said. "Not today. Not earlier this week either." She swallowed. "What are you talking about?" "I went by your office." Her face drained of color. "You what?" "You weren't in any meeting." "No one was." She stared at me, stunned. Caught again. I took a step closer. "And you weren't alone at the gym." Her breathing hitched. I let the silence fill the space between us. It felt like a wall rising higher with each passing second. "Who is he?" I asked. She blinked hard. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her voice came out thin. He's just someone I met there. I nodded slowly. Someone you laugh with. Someone you touch. Someone you lie for. Tears filled her eyes instantly, but I felt nothing except a heavy ache spreading through my chest. Not anger. Not rage. Just disappointment so deep it felt like I was sinking into it. Please, she whispered. Let me explain. I tried to talk to you, I said quietly. For months. You shut me out. She wrapped her arms around herself. I didn't do it to hurt you. You did it because you wanted something from him that you didn't want from me. My voice wasn't loud. It was steady. That's the part that hurts. She shook her head frantically. It wasn't like that. I felt seen. And I didn't know how to tell you, I felt lost. I let out a shaky breath. So you lied instead. She wiped her cheek. I didn't know how to fix us. You could have tried. I did, she whispered. But it felt like you stopped hearing me. The words landed hard. I knew we had problems. I knew the distance wasn't all on her. But betrayal wasn't something you stumbled into by accident. It required choices. And she'd made them, one after another. I didn't want this to happen, she said through a shaky breath. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did. She cried harder, sinking onto the couch. I stood across from her, feeling an ache settle behind my ribs, the kind that wouldn't go away for a long time. What do we do now? She asked. For the first time since this started, I didn't hesitate. I don't know if there's a we anymore. She looked up sharply, her face twisted in fear. Please don't say that. I have to say it, I murmured. Because it's true. The room grew, impossibly quiet. Even her breathing softened, like she was afraid to break whatever fragile thing was left between us. I turned toward the hallway, grabbing my coat. Where are you going? She asked, her voice cracking. I need time, I said. I need space to think. Away from lies. Away from the pieces of this I'm too close to see clearly. She stood, reaching out like she wanted to grab my sleeve, but she stopped herself. Please don't leave like this. I'll come back, I said. I'm not disappearing. But tonight, I can't stay. The moment I stepped outside, the cold hit me again, but this time it didn't hurt. It felt grounding. Sharp.
Real.
I walked to my car and looked back once through the window. She stood in the living room with her arms wrapped around herself, shoulders trembling, staring at the door like she could will me to turn around. I didn't. I opened the car door, got inside, and let the engine growl to life. As I pulled out of the driveway, the house looked smaller than I remembered. Quieter, like something vital had already slipped out of its walls. I drove with no destination in mind, just the steady rhythm of the road beneath me. The truth had come in pieces, slow and sharp. And now that it was in front of me, there was no way to unsee it. Some endings don't scream. Some endings just settle. And as I disappeared down the quiet street, I felt the weight of ours settling too.